My name is Joanne, and at 28, I never imagined a simple sandwich would change my career. Working at Tech Vision Solutions meant constantly rushing, especially that Tuesday when I helped Eleanor next door after her fall. I was already late when I spotted a tired maintenance worker and impulsively gave him my lunch. Minutes later, I froze in the boardroom doorway. That same man in coveralls now sat at the head table watching my boss squirm. If you're watching this from your workplace break room or maybe scrolling during your commute, drop a comment letting me know. And like this video if you've ever had a boss who made your life miserable. Let me back up and tell you about Tech Vision Solutions, the company where I'd been working as a marketing coordinator for almost 3 years. From the outside, it looked like an amazing place to work. Growing rapidly innovative products, modern offices with those fancy coffee machines and occasional catered lunches. The company had so much potential, and I was initially thrilled to be part of it. But that excitement faded quickly after I started working under Bradley Mitchell, the marketing director, and my direct supervisor. If you've ever had a toxic boss, you might recognize some of these traits. Bradley was a master of micromanagement. He would hover over your shoulder while you worked, questioning every decision, no matter how small. He would demand hourly updates on projects, then criticize your work for not being innovative enough, only to suggest the exact same idea you had proposed last week, which he had rejected. One of Bradley's favorite tactics was taking credit for everyone else's work. I once spent 3 weeks developing a social media campaign that increased our engagement by 40%. During the presentation to the executive team, Bradley presented it as his brainchild. When I tried to speak up, he cut me off and later pulled me aside to tell me I was being unprofessional and not a team player. The belittling was constant. Nothing was ever good enough. If you finished something early, you were rushing and being careless. If you took the time to make it perfect, you were inefficient and slow. He would make comments about my appearance, my voice, even the lunch I brought from home. Do you really think a professional dresses like that? He would say loudly enough for others to hear? Though my business casual attire was perfectly appropriate. My daily existence at Tech Vision became a struggle of impossible deadlines, constant criticism, and zero appreciation. I would start work at 7 in the morning and often not leave until 8 or 9 at night, trying desperately to meet his ever-changing expectations. Weekends were no longer my own. My friends stopped inviting me out because they knew I would either be working or too exhausted to be good company. There were a few people at the office who made the situation somewhat bearable. Diana from HR was one of them. She was kind and supportive, and I later found out she had been quietly documenting Bradley's behavior based on employee reports. She couldn't do much without executive support, but she tried her best to be an ally. Then there was Rachel, another member of the marketing team. She was talented and creative, but had learned to keep her head down after Bradley humiliated her during a team meeting for suggesting a campaign direction different from what he wanted. She was always kind to me, offering silent support with a sympathetic smile or bringing me coffee after a particularly brutal interaction with Bradley. Thomas from IT was another witness to Bradley's behavior. His desk was near the marketing department, and he often overheard Bradley's tirades. He would sometimes find excuses to fix non-existent computer issues, just to give me a break from the tension. "Your system needs an update," he would say loudly, then whisper, "Take a breather. Go get some coffee. I'll tell him it's going to take 20 minutes. The worst part was how Bradley created a competitive, toxic environment where team members were pitted against each other. He would tell me that Stephanie had criticized my work, then tell Stephanie I had questioned her commitment. Only months later did we realize he was playing us against each other when we accidentally compared notes. By then, the damage to our working relationship was already done. Stephanie had requested a transfer to another department. I wasn't naive. I tried to speak up about the workplace issues. I scheduled a meeting with Bradley's boss, Patrick, the VP of marketing. He listened politely, then suggested that perhaps I was being too sensitive and needed to develop a thicker skin if I wanted to succeed in business. He reminded me that Bradley got results, and that was what mattered to the company. I left that meeting feeling defeated and even more alone. The rumors about a new CEO started about a month before the incident. Our founder and current CEO, William Crawford, was retiring, and the board had selected someone from outside the company to take over. The word was that the new CEO wanted to evaluate the company culture and make changes where needed. Bradley became even more insufferable after hearing this news. Suddenly, everything had to be perfect for the new CEO's arrival. He scheduled a major presentation where each department would showcase their achievements and strategies. The marketing team was given a prime slot, and Bradley made it clear that our presentation needed to blow everyone else out of the water. This is our chance to show the new CEO that marketing is the backbone of this company's success, he told us during a team meeting. And I won't tolerate anything less than perfection. I was assigned to create the presentation. For weeks I worked on it, gathering data, creating compelling visuals, and crafting a narrative that showcased our successes while being honest about our challenges. I ran it by Rachel, who thought it was excellent. Even Thomas, who had no background in marketing, was impressed when I showed him. The night before the presentation, Bradley called an emergency team meeting at 7 p.m. I arrived to find him looking at my presentation on the conference room screen. "This won't do," he said, without even looking at me. "It's too, basic." The new CEO comes from Apex Industries. They're known for their cutting-edge marketing. This looks like something a college intern would put together. I felt my heart sink. "But you approved this direction last week," I reminded him. "Well, I've changed my mind," he snapped. "We need to start over. I want something completely different, more dynamic, more innovative." "The meeting is at 10 a.m. tomorrow," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "That's less than 15 hours to create a completely new presentation." "Then I suggest you get started," Bradley said finally, looking at me with cold eyes. "Unless you don't think you're up to the challenge, in which case I can find someone who is." The threat was clear. I stayed at the office until 2 in the morning, completely reworking the presentation based on Bradley's vague and contradictory feedback. By the time I left, my eyes were burning from staring at the screen, and I felt a migraine forming. But the presentation was done, and it was good, despite the impossible circumstances. Little did I know that the next day would change everything. My alarm blared at 6 a.m., and I groaned as I reached to silence it. After just 4 hours of sleep, my body felt like it was made of lead. The presentation was finalized, but I still needed to review it one more time before the meeting. I forced myself out of bed and into the shower, hoping the cold water would wake me up. I had just finished getting dressed when I heard a thud and a cry from next door. My elderly neighbor, Eleanor, lived alone since her husband passed away last year. At 82, she was fiercely independent but increasingly frail. I rushed out my door and found her on her front porch trying to pick up the morning newspaper when she lost her balance. "Eleanor, are you okay?" I knelt beside her, checking for injuries. "Oh, Joanne, I'm so embarrassed," she said, her voice shaky. "My hip just isn't what it used to be. I thought I could reach the paper without my cane." I helped her up and into her living room, made sure she took her morning medications, and prepared her a quick breakfast. She insisted she was fine, but I called her son just to be safe. He promised to come by later that morning to check on her. By the time I left Eleanor's house, I was already running late. I rushed back to my apartment, grabbed my things, and quickly packed the lunch I had prepared the night before. It was my grandmother's special chicken salad sandwich recipe, with roasted chicken grapes, walnuts, and a touch of curry powder. I also threw in an apple, some homemade cookies, and a small container of pasta salad. At least I would have something good to eat after the stressful presentation. My commute was a nightmare. The bus was late then, got stuck in traffic because of an accident. I kept checking my watch, feeling my anxiety rise with each passing minute. The presentation was at 10, and it was already 9:30 when the bus finally arrived near my office building. I practically ran the last 3 blocks clutching my bag and the folder with my presentation notes. That's when I noticed him. A man in worn coveralls was sitting on a bench near the building entrance. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, staring at the ground. He wore the generic blue coveralls of maintenance workers with no company logo I could recognize. Something about his dejected posture made me slow down. As I got closer, I could see the lines of fatigue on his face. He looked up briefly, offering a polite nod, before returning his gaze to the ground. I noticed he had no lunchbox or bag with him, despite it being nearly mid-morning. In a split-second decision that I still can't fully explain, I stopped and opened my bag. "Excuse me," I said, pulling out my lunch bag. "I'm sorry if this seems weird, but you look like you could use this more than me. It's homemade and pretty good if I say so myself." He looked up surprised. "That's very kind, but I couldn't take your lunch." "Please." "I insist," I said, already late and knowing I could grab something from the cafeteria later. "It's my grandmother's recipe. Chicken salad sandwich with a secret ingredient." After a moment's hesitation, he accepted the bag with a genuine smile that transformed his tired face. "Thank you. This is unexpected and very kind." "It's no problem," I said already, backing away toward the building entrance. "Enjoy it." "I will," he called after me, "and thank you again." I waved and rushed into the building, already 10 minutes late for my pre-meeting check-in with Bradley. As I hurried through the lobby, my phone buzzed continuously with incoming texts. "Where are you? The CEO is already here. If you mess this up, you're done." All from Bradley, of course. Each message more frantic and threatening than the last. My stomach knotted as I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 14th floor. Bradley was pacing outside the conference room when I arrived, his face red with anger. When he saw me, he stormed over, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside. "Where the hell have you been?" he hissed, his fingers digging into my arm. "The new CEO is waiting. Don't embarrass me." "I'm sorry," I said, trying to pull away from his painful grip. "My elderly neighbor fell this morning, and then the bus was late, and—" "I don't care if the entire city was on fire," Bradley interrupted. "This meeting is everything. The presentation better be perfect, or you can clean out your desk this afternoon." He finally released my arm, and I could feel the blood rushing back to where his fingers had been. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "Did you at least bring the printed handouts?" he demanded. I nodded, pulling the folder from my bag. "Yes, everything's ready." "It better be," he said, straightening his tie. "Follow my lead. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, try to look professional for once." As we walked toward the conference room, Bradley continued to whisper criticisms and threats. My anxiety was reaching a breaking point, but I focused on my breathing, trying to center myself before facing the executive team and the mysterious new CEO who had everyone on edge. "Remember," Bradley said as we reached the door, "this is my presentation. You're just here to advance the slides and hand out materials. Got it?" I nodded silently, clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. Bradley plastered on his fake smile, the one he used for executives and clients, and opened the door. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. As I entered the boardroom behind Bradley, the first thing I noticed was the unusual silence. Typically, before these meetings, there would be small talk, the rustle of papers, perhaps someone making a last-minute phone call. Today, everyone sat perfectly still, their eyes shifting between me and the head of the table. That's when I saw him, the maintenance worker. The same man I'd given my lunch to just minutes ago was now sitting at the head of the boardroom table, still in his blue coveralls. My grandmother's chicken salad sandwich was unwrapped in front of him, and he was taking a bite as we walked in. I froze my mind, struggling to process what I was seeing. Bradley, not yet noticing my reaction, strode forward confidently. "Mr. Hayes, I apologize for the delay. I'm Bradley Mitchell, Marketing Director, and this is my assistant, Joanne." The man at the head of the table swallowed his bite of sandwich and smiled warmly in my direction. "Yes, Joanne and I have already met. She kindly gave me her lunch when she saw me looking tired outside the building." He turned to me. "And I have to say, this is possibly the best chicken salad sandwich I've ever had. You mentioned it was your grandmother's recipe." Bradley turned to look at me, confusion spreading across his face. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice barely audible, The secret is a touch of curry powder. The man nodded appreciatively and set down the sandwich. I should probably introduce myself properly now. I'm Alexander Hayes, the new CEO of Tech Vision Solutions. The blood drained from Bradley's face so quickly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Alexander Hayes stood up and unbuttoned the coveralls, revealing a crisp white shirt and tie underneath. I apologize for the unorthodox introduction. When I take over a new company, I like to spend my first week observing the culture and operations without the formality and pretense that often comes with the CEO title. He gestured for us to take our seats. Bradley moved robotically to an empty chair, his eyes wide with shock. I sat down next to Diana from HR, who gave me a small, encouraging smile. Over the past week, Alexander continued, I've been working alongside the maintenance team, the customer service representatives, and even spent a day in the warehouse. It's given me invaluable insight into how Tech Vision really operates, not just how it looks on paper or in official meetings. He walked around the table slowly as he spoke. I've had some fascinating conversations with employees at all levels. The warehouse staff told me about the impossible shipping deadlines they're given without consultation. The customer service team shared how they're not empowered to actually solve customer problems. The developers mentioned how their warnings about technical debt are consistently ignored in favor of rushing new features to market. Alexander stopped behind Bradley's chair. But I've heard particularly concerning reports about the management style in the marketing department. Bradley straightened in his chair, trying to regain his composure. Mr. Hayes, I can assure you that the marketing department under my leadership has consistently exceeded targets and... Alexander raised a hand, silencing Bradley mid-sentence. Results matter, Mr. Mitchell. But how those results are achieved matters just as much, if not more. A company's culture starts at the top and flows downward. Toxic leadership poisons the entire organization, regardless of short-term performance metrics. He returned to the head of the table and sat down. This morning, as I sat outside your building, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before this meeting, I observed something interesting. Dozens of your employees walked past me without a second glance. Some were staring at their phones, others rushing with coffee cups, many looking stressed and unhappy. Alexander glanced at me with a kind smile. And then Joanne came along. Despite clearly being in a hurry, she stopped when she saw someone who appeared to be in need. She gave up her own lunch without hesitation, showing kindness to someone she believed was just a maintenance worker. That says a lot about her character. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, but also a warmth spreading through my chest at his words. After our brief interaction, Alexander continued, I watched her enter the building, and what I saw next was quite illuminating. His eyes shifted to Bradley. I saw you grab her arm in the lobby, Mr. Mitchell. I saw you speaking to her in what appeared to be a threatening manner. The security cameras would have captured that interaction, I imagine. Bradley's face, which had been pale with shock, now flushed red. Sir, I was merely expressing concern about punctuality, which is a reasonable expectation for professional. I've also taken the liberty of reviewing some company documentation, Alexander interrupted, pulling out a folder. Employee complaints, turnover rates, exit interviews. He opened the folder and scanned a page. The marketing department has the highest turnover rate in the company, 87% in the past 2 years. The average across the rest of the departments is 23%. He flipped to another page. Exit interviews cite management issues as the primary reason for leaving in 92% of cases from your department. Diana shifted slightly beside me. I realized she must have provided these documents. Mr. Hayes, Bradley said, his voice taking on a placating tone. You have to understand that marketing is a high-pressure environment. Not everyone is cut out for it. I maintain high standards because our company deserves nothing less. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. High standards are important, but there's a difference between high standards and a hostile work environment. He looked around the table. I'm curious to hear from others. What has your experience been with the marketing department and its leadership? The room fell silent again. Years of conditioning under Bradley's regime had taught everyone to stay quiet to not make waves. I held my breath, wondering if anyone would dare to speak. The silence stretched uncomfortably, as Alexander waited patiently. Finally, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a large organizational chart. He slid it across the table toward Bradley, who watched it approach as if it were a snake. Alexander pointed to Bradley's picture on the chart. "So tell me what this person does. What value does Bradley Mitchell bring to Tech Vision Solutions?" Bradley cleared his throat, straightening his tie nervously. "As marketing director, I oversee all marketing initiatives and strategies. Under my leadership, our market presence has increased by 45%. We've launched 6 successful product campaigns in the last year alone, and our social media engagement metrics have doubled." Alexander nodded, taking notes. "And how would you describe your management style?" "I'm results-oriented," Bradley said, gaining confidence. "I believe in pushing people to reach their full potential. Sometimes that requires firm guidance and high expectations." "Firm guidance," Alexander repeated, looking up from his notes. "Would others on your team characterize it the same way?" Bradley glanced around the table, his eyes lingering on me with a warning. "I believe they would agree that my methods, while perhaps demanding at times, ultimately benefit both the company and their professional development." Alexander turned to Rachel, who sat across from me. "You're in the marketing department as well." "Correct, Rachel, isn't it? Would you agree with Mr. Mitchell's assessment of his management style?" Rachel looked like a deer caught in headlights. She glanced at Bradley, then at me, then down at her hands. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. I held my breath, knowing how much courage it would take for her to speak honestly. She began, then paused. She took a deep breath and looked directly at Alexander. "No, I wouldn't describe it as firm guidance. I would describe it as intimidation and manipulation." Bradley's face darkened. "Rachel, that's completely—" "Please allow her to finish," Alexander interrupted firmly. Rachel's hands trembled, but her voice grew stronger. "Last year, I developed a campaign for the ProTech line that won an industry award. Bradley presented it to the executive team as his own concept. When I tried to discuss it with him privately, he threatened to put me on a performance improvement plan and told me no one would believe me anyway because I was just a coordinator." Bradley scoffed. "That's a complete misrepresentation of what happened. The concept was mine. Rachel simply executed some of the details." "That's not true," I heard myself say before I could stop the words. All eyes turned to me. I saw Rachel's original presentation before Bradley changed it. The entire concept was hers, from the tagline to the visual direction. Thomas from IT, who was present for the technical aspects of the meeting, spoke up next. "I can confirm that. I helped Rachel with the technical specifications for the campaign microsites. The concept was entirely hers." Bradley's face contorted with anger. "This is absurd. You're an IT specialist. What would you know about marketing concepts?" "Enough to recognize when someone's stealing credit," Thomas replied calmly. Bradley turned to Alexander, desperation creeping into his voice. "Mr. Hayes, I don't know what kind of conspiracy is happening here, but these accusations are completely unfounded. I have documentation of all my contributions." "Documentation that you forced your team to falsify Diana from HR," said quietly. "I have emails where you instructed Joanne to change the timestamps and creator information on campaign documents." Bradley's head snapped toward her. "You had no right to access those emails." "Actually, as part of an HR investigation into your conduct, I had every right," Diana replied. "Multiple employees have filed complaints about your behavior, Mr. Mitchell. I've been building a case for months, but until now, upper management wasn't willing to take action because of your department's apparent results." Alexander leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, it seems there's a pattern here that goes beyond mere misunderstandings. Would you care to address these specific allegations?" Bradley's demeanor suddenly shifted. His face hardened and he leaned back in his chair with forced casualness. "I see what's happening here. Joanne has been planning this for months, turning my team against me because she couldn't handle constructive criticism. My jaw dropped at the accusation. That's not. She's always been jealous of my position. Bradley continued talking over me. She's manipulated everyone in this room to undermine me just as we're impressing a new CEO. It's a transparent power play. Alexander turned to me. Is that true, Joanne? Have you been orchestrating a campaign against Mr. Mitchell? Before I could answer, Rachel interrupted. That's ridiculous. Joanne is the one who keeps this team functioning despite Bradley, not because of him. She stays late fixing his mistakes. She takes the blame when his bad decisions cause problems. She protects the junior team members from the worst of his outbursts. Bradley slammed his hand on the table. This is insubordination. You're all going to regret this little mutiny. When this meeting is over, I expect resignations from everyone who's spoken against me, or I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. The threat hung in the air, bold and unmistakable. Alexander's expression remained impassive as he continued taking notes. Mr. Mitchell, he finally said, are you threatening your employees with retaliation for speaking honestly when directly questioned by the CEO? Bradley seemed to suddenly realize the hole he had dug himself into. No, of course not. I'm simply expressing my disappointment in what I perceive as disloyalty. Let me be clear, Alexander said, his voice taking on a steely edge for the first time. Loyalty to a company means doing what's best for the organization and its people, not covering up toxic behavior. Loyalty flows both ways, and from what I'm hearing, you've shown very little loyalty to the people who work for you. He turned to Diana. You mentioned an investigation. Do you have that documentation with you? Diana nodded and passed him a thick folder. This contains all the formal complaints, along with supporting evidence, including emails, witness statements, and records of incidents. Alexander flipped through the folder, his expression growing more serious with each page. Bradley watched him, his face alternating between anger and fear. This is all hearsay and exaggerations, Bradley finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. Alexander closed the folder and looked directly at Bradley. Mr. Mitchell, based on what I've heard and seen today, combined with this documentation, I believe we need to continue this conversation privately. Diana, as HR director, would you please accompany Mr. Mitchell and me to your office? Bradley's face went completely white. Is that really necessary? I think there's been a misunderstanding that we could clear up right here. I believe we're well beyond misunderstandings, Alexander replied, standing up. The rest of you please take a 15-minute break. We'll reconvene afterward. As Bradley stood on shaky legs, he shot me a look of pure hatred. You'll regret this, he whispered, as he passed by my chair. But for the first time in years, facing his anger didn't fill me with dread. Something had fundamentally changed in the power dynamic, and we all felt it. The room collectively held its breath as Alexander, Diana, and Bradley exited the door, closing behind them, with a soft click that somehow felt monumental. For several seconds after the door closed, no one in the boardroom moved or spoke. It was as if we were all processing what had just happened, afraid that speaking might somehow reverse this unexpected turn of events. The tension that had been building for so long had finally broken, leaving us in an unfamiliar state of shocked relief. Rachel was the first to break the silence, releasing a long, shuddering breath. Did that really just happen? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded slowly. I think Bradley just self-destructed in record time. A nervous laugh escaped from someone, and suddenly the room filled with whispered conversations. People were sharing their own Bradley stories, experiences they had never dared voice in the office before. Rachel moved to the chair next to mine. Joanne, I'm so sorry, she said, her eyes glistening with tears. I should have spoken up sooner about the campaign and everything else. I was just so afraid of losing my job. I have student loans and my mom's medical bills. Her voice trailed off. I squeezed her hand. I understand. I was afraid too. We all were. Thomas came over and perched on the edge of the table near us. I should have said something ages ago, he admitted. I saw how he treated all of you. I documented some of it in emails to Diana. but I never confronted him directly. I was worried about being labeled a troublemaker. Bradley created a culture of fear, I said. That's not on any of us. He deliberately isolated everyone, so we'd be too afraid to band together. As we talked, I felt years of tension beginning to dissolve. There was something powerfully cathartic about finally acknowledging aloud what we had all experienced. Other team members joined our conversation, each sharing their own stories of Bradley's manipulation, gaslighting, and bullying. Patricia from the design team revealed how Bradley had taken her ideas for the website redesign, then criticized her original concepts in front of the entire marketing team. Lawrence from content marketing described how Bradley had made him rewrite entire campaigns overnight, only to revert to the original version and claim Lawrence's work wasn't good enough. Each story reinforced what we all knew: Bradley's toxic leadership had been slowly poisoning not just the marketing department, but the entire company culture. His influence spread beyond his direct reports, affecting interdepartmental relationships and even how we interacted with clients. 45 minutes passed before the door opened again. Alexander returned alone, his expression solemn but resolute. The room immediately fell silent as he took his place at the head of the table. "Thank you for your patience," he said. "I want to be transparent about what's happening. Bradley Mitchell has been placed on administrative leave pending a full review of the complaints against him. Diana will be conducting additional interviews with current and former team members to ensure we have a complete understanding of the situation." A collective exhale seemed to pass through the room. Alexander continued, "I believe in dealing with personnel matters privately and respectfully, even in difficult circumstances like these. What I can tell you is that TechVision Solutions will not tolerate bullying, harassment, or abuse of power at any level of the organization. That's a commitment I'm making to all of you today." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. When his eyes met mine, he smiled slightly. "Now I believe we were supposed to have a marketing presentation today," he said. "Joanne, I understand you prepared the materials. Would you be comfortable presenting them?" My heart raced. I had prepared to silently advance slides while Bradley took all the credit, not to actually deliver the presentation myself. But something had shifted inside me. After witnessing Bradley's downfall and feeling the support of my colleagues, I found a confidence I hadn't felt in years. "Yes," I said, standing up and moving to the front of the room. "I'd be happy to." I connected my laptop to the projector and pulled up the original presentation, not the hastily revised version Bradley had demanded last night. Taking a deep breath, I began to outline our marketing strategy, our successes, and our challenges with honest enthusiasm. Without Bradley's oppressive presence, I found myself speaking with passion about our work and our vision for the future. As I presented, Alexander asked insightful questions that showed he genuinely understood marketing. The other executives engaged thoughtfully, offering suggestions and comments that were constructive rather than critical. For the first time in years, I felt respected and heard in a company meeting. When I finished, Alexander was the first to applaud. "Thank you, Joanne. That was excellent. I particularly appreciate your candor about the challenges as well as the successes. Real improvement can only happen when we're honest about where we stand." He turned to the rest of the team. "I'd like to hear your thoughts on the marketing department's structure and what changes might improve collaboration and creativity." For the next hour, we had the most open and productive discussion I could remember in my time at TechVision. People spoke freely, building on each other's ideas rather than competing. Alexander took notes and asked questions that showed he was genuinely interested in our perspectives. Near the end of the meeting, he turned to me. "Joanne, based on what I've seen today and the feedback from your colleagues, I'd like you to consider taking on the role of interim marketing director while we determine our long-term leadership strategy. Would that be something you're interested in?" The question caught me completely off guard. Me, marketing director. Just hours ago, I had been Bradley's scapegoat, constantly on the verge of being fired. Now, I was being offered his position. I'm not sure I'm qualified," I stammered. "From what I've seen and heard today, you're more than qualified," Alexander replied. You understand the work you have, the respect of your colleagues, and you've somehow managed to keep this department functioning despite extremely challenging leadership. Those are the qualities I value in a director. Looking around the table, I saw encouraging nods and smiles from my colleagues. Rachel gave me a thumbs up. Thomas mouthed, You can do it. I took a deep breath. Yes, I would be interested. Thank you for the opportunity. Alexander smiled. Excellent. We'll discuss the details tomorrow. For now, I suggest we all take some time to process today's events. This meeting is adjourned. As people gathered their things and began to leave, still buzzing with conversation about the dramatic turn of events, Alexander approached me. That chicken salad sandwich really was exceptional, he said with a warm smile. Perhaps next time we can have lunch together in the cafeteria rather than on a bench outside. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd like that. As I packed up my presentation materials, I realized that my life at TechVision had completely transformed in just a few hours, all because I'd decided to give my lunch to a stranger in coveralls. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness return in ways we could never imagine. The weeks following that fateful meeting brought sweeping changes to TechVision Solutions. True to his word, Alexander Hayes initiated a thorough investigation into Bradley's management practices. Diana conducted interviews with current employees and reached out to those who had left the company because of Bradley. The evidence was overwhelming, and within 2 weeks, Bradley was officially terminated. My first day as interim marketing director was both exciting and terrifying. I arrived at the office early, trying to gather my thoughts before the team arrived. This was the same space where I had spent countless hours feeling inadequate and afraid. But now it was my responsibility to transform it into something better. When I reached my new office, Bradley's old space, I hesitated at the door. It felt wrong somehow, as if entering might somehow infect me with his toxic leadership style. Alexander found me standing there staring at the nameplate that still read Bradley Mitchell. We should get that changed, he said, coming to stand beside me. What do you think? Joanne Reynolds, marketing director. It has a nice ring to it. I smiled nervously. Even without the interim part. He nodded. I have a good feeling about you in this role. But let's take things one step at a time. Inside the office was a study in Bradley's personality. Awards and certificates covered one wall, but notably none that acknowledged team contributions. The furniture was expensive and imposing, designed to intimidate rather than welcome. The first thing I did was rearrange everything, moving the desk so it didn't create a barrier between me and anyone who entered. I brought in plants, photos, and even a small couch for more casual conversations. My biggest challenge wasn't the workload or learning new systems. It was overcoming my own self-doubt. Years under Bradley's criticism had left deep scars on my confidence. In my first week, I must have written and rewritten each email 20 times, second-guessing every decision. What if I'm terrible at this? I confessed to Rachel over coffee. What if I'm just as bad as Bradley in a different way? Rachel shook her head firmly. Not possible. You know why? Because you're asking that question. Bradley never once wondered if he was being a good leader. He assumed he was perfect, and everyone else was the problem. With support from colleagues who quickly became friends rather than competitors, I gradually found my footing. I implemented practices that were the opposite of Bradley's approach. Where he had hoarded information, I created transparent communication channels. Where he had pitted team members against each other, I established collaborative processes that gave everyone credit for their contributions. One of my first official acts was to create a system where everyone's ideas were documented with proper attribution. If someone's concept made it into a campaign, their name went on it regardless of their position in the hierarchy. I scheduled regular feedback sessions where team members could safely share concerns without fear of retaliation. The results were almost immediate. The marketing team's productivity didn't just maintain its previous levels, it increased dramatically. Without the constant stress and fear, creativity flourished. People started staying late not because they were afraid of being fired, but because they were excited about their projects. Alexander became something of a mentor to me during this transition. We met weekly to discuss leadership philosophy and practical management techniques. He shared stories from his own career, including mistakes he had made and lessons learned. The hardest thing about leadership, he told me during one of these sessions, is remembering that your position doesn't make you better than anyone else, just differently responsible. Your job isn't to be the smartest person in the room. It's to bring out the best in everyone in that room. Rachel and Thomas became my closest allies in transforming the department. Rachel took on more responsibility with campaign development finally getting the recognition she deserved. Thomas created better technical integration between marketing and IT, bridging a gap that had existed for years under Bradley's territorial approach. Not everything was smooth sailing. Some team members who had thrived under Bradley's competitive environment struggled with the new collaborative approach. A few even left for other companies. But for each person who departed, we found new talent attracted by the improving reputation of our workplace culture. About 3 months after Bradley's departure, I received an email from Stephanie, the colleague who had transferred to another department because of Bradley's manipulation. She asked if we could meet for coffee. "I've been hearing amazing things about the changes in marketing," she said when we met. "People actually want to work with your team now instead of dreading it." Her words meant more to me than any performance metric. "We still have a long way to go," I admitted. "But at least people aren't having panic attacks in the bathroom anymore." Stephanie smiled. "Would you be open to me transferring back? I miss marketing and I miss the team. I just couldn't handle Bradley anymore." "We'd love to have you back," I told her sincerely. Curious about how deep the damage had gone, I worked with Diana to contact former employees who had left because of Bradley. Many were surprised to hear from us, even more surprised to learn about the changes. Several expressed interest in returning, and over the next few months, 3 former team members rejoined TechVision. One of the most meaningful changes came from an unexpected source. I kept a brown paper lunch bag on my desk as a reminder of how my journey to leadership began. When Alexander noticed it during a meeting in my office, I explained its significance. "It reminds me that small acts of kindness matter," I told him, "and that you never know who someone really is, or what impact they might have on your life." Alexander considered this for a moment, then suggested, "What if we formalized that concept? A company volunteer program where employees could give back to the community." The idea resonated immediately. Within weeks, we launched TechVision Gives Back, a program that gave employees paid time off for volunteer work and matched charitable donations. The program became one of our most popular benefits, with over 70% of employees participating in the first year. As the 6-month mark of my interim position approached, I found myself reflecting on the incredible journey. The department's metrics showed significant improvement, not just in marketing results, but in employee satisfaction and retention. The toxic culture Bradley had created was gradually being replaced by something healthier and more sustainable. But perhaps the most profound change was within myself. The anxious, self-doubting person who had given away her lunch that fateful day was transforming into a confident leader who trusted her instincts and valued her own voice. I still had moments of uncertainty, but they no longer paralyzed me. The sandwich that changed everything had become company legend. Sometimes when facing a difficult decision, someone would ask with a smile, "What would the chicken salad sandwich do?" It became our shorthand for choosing kindness and integrity over expediency or self-interest. And as for Eleanor, my elderly neighbor, whose fall had made me late that pivotal morning, I now brought her dinner, regularly transforming what had once been a rushed obligation into a meaningful friendship. Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways, bringing the right people into our lives at exactly the right moment. 6 months to the day after that fateful meeting, Alexander called me into his office. I had been expecting this conversation. My interim period was officially ending, and it was time to discuss the future of the marketing department leadership. "Close the door and have a seat, Joanne," he said, smiling warmly. On his desk sat a familiar brown paper bag. "Chicken salad today, my treat. I had the cafeteria make it according to your grandmother's recipe. Hope you don't mind that I shared it with them." I laughed as I sat down. "Not at all. Good recipes should be shared. As we unwrapped our sandwiches, Alexander pushed a folder across the desk to me. I'd like you to take a look at this. Inside was an official offer letter, making my position as marketing director permanent, along with a substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities. The board unanimously approved your appointment, Alexander said. The transformation you've led in the marketing department has exceeded all expectations. Employee satisfaction is up 83%, turnover is down to just 7%, and your campaigns have increased customer engagement by 62%. Those are impressive numbers by any standard. I felt a surge of pride mixed with humility. It hasn't been just me. The entire team deserves credit. That right there is why you're the right person for this job, Alexander replied. A leader who shares success is a leader people will follow anywhere. That afternoon, we gathered the marketing team to announce the news. The spontaneous applause brought tears to my eyes. Rachel hugged me tight and whispered, "No one deserves this more than you." Later that week, we received notification that TechVision had won an award for Most Improved Workplace Culture from a prominent industry association. The award ceremony was scheduled for the following month, and Alexander asked me to deliver the acceptance speech. Standing at the podium in front of industry peers and colleagues, I felt a profound sense of how far we had come. Transforming a workplace culture isn't about grand gestures or perfect policies, I told the audience. It's about daily choices to prioritize people over processes, collaboration over competition, and kindness over expediency. It's about creating spaces where people feel safe to contribute their best work without fear. Looking out at my team members in the audience, I continued. The journey from toxic to healthy isn't linear or quick. It happens one conversation, one decision, one lunch break at a time. And it requires constant vigilance, because culture isn't something you achieve, it's something you nurture continually. The healing journey from my years under Bradley's leadership had not been easy or straightforward. For months after his departure, I still found myself flinching when receiving feedback, expecting criticism that never came. I struggled with imposter syndrome, questioning whether I truly deserved my new role, or had simply been in the right place at the right time. The first presentation I gave as official marketing director, my hands shook so badly I could barely change slides. Alexander noticed and casually took over advancing the slides, while I spoke a small kindness that allowed me to focus on my words rather than my anxiety. Gradually, with support from colleagues and some professional coaching arranged by Diana from HR, I learned to trust my instincts again. I recognized that the voice in my head that constantly criticized and doubted was not my voice, but Bradley's internalized after years of emotional abuse. Separating his toxic influence from my own thoughts was perhaps the most challenging aspect of recovery. Building confidence in my abilities came through seeing the positive results of my leadership approach. When team members began coming to me with their ideas, trusting I would listen rather than dismiss or steal them, I knew we were creating something special. When junior staff members mentioned they felt safe asking questions and admitting mistakes, I recognized the culture shift was real. The company volunteer program continued to grow, expanding to include community partnerships and mentorship opportunities. I maintained my friendship with Eleanor, my elderly neighbor, and even invited her to our company holiday party, where she charmed everyone with stories from her own career, as one of the first female accountants at her firm in the 1960s. One of my proudest accomplishments was establishing a mentorship program for new employees. Having experienced the isolation and confusion of working under toxic leadership, I wanted to ensure no one else felt that lost at TechVision. Each new hire was paired with an experienced team member who helped them navigate not just their job responsibilities, but the company culture. As I concluded my acceptance speech, I shared the most profound lesson I had learned through this extraordinary journey. In business, we often talk about strategies and metrics and bottom lines, but at its heart, leadership is about humanity. It's about recognizing that the person across the desk or on the other end of an email is a human being with hopes, fears, and dignity. When we forget that fundamental truth, no amount of business success can make up for the damage we cause. I paused looking at Alexander, who nodded encouragingly. A simple act of kindness, offering a sandwich to someone who looked tired and hungry, changed the trajectory of my career and ultimately our company. Not because it was strategic or calculated, but precisely because it wasn't. It was human. And in that humanity lies the secret to building organizations where people can thrive. The applause that followed felt like a final closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The shadow of Bradley's toxic leadership would always be part of our story, but it no longer defined us or our future. Back at my desk the following Monday, I looked at the brown paper lunch bag I still kept as a reminder and smiled. Then I opened my computer and began drafting ideas for our next community initiative. My phone rang. It was Alexander. "Are we still on for the leadership committee meeting at 2? "Absolutely," I replied. "I've got some new ideas to share." "Looking forward to it," he said. "By the way, I've been meaning to ask what was the other secret ingredient in that chicken salad sandwich, besides the curry powder?" I laughed. "My grandmother always said the secret ingredient is making it for someone you care about. That's what makes any recipe special." After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the journey. From a bullied employee to a respected leader. From surviving each day to shaping the future. From fear to confidence. All because I followed my instinct to show kindness to a stranger. What small act of kindness might change your life, or someone else's today? Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your career path, or had a toxic boss who made your work life miserable? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to see more real-life experiences, and share it with anyone who might need a reminder that kindness matters even in the corporate world. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the smallest choices create the biggest ripples in our lives.